Why have this there for you? Well, I want you to think like, how did we get here? Not just like how did we get here in the last 148 years, the 17 spiritual pioneers that said, let's plant a church in Steamboat Rock, but how did this happen that there's churches like this all over the world that are meeting today? And it's because a few individuals followed Jesus when he called them and said, hey, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And so that's been going on. And what this is for is to help you see, like, how do you fit into seeing that continuing to happen? Because he wants it to continue to happen. And so Merv Budd, who I stole this from, he calls this an evangelistic equipping paradigm. But I'm just calling it the Go Fish Grid. So this is the Go Fish Grid. And we talked about the first lines of it in the first sermon. So I'm just going to review those. And you can write them in as you go. So why? Why be involved in this evangelistic activity that Jesus has called us to? We said it's a doxological discipline. Jesus said, come follow me. So it's a following God discipline that worships God. It brings praise to God. And then it's a formational practice. So I will make you fishers of men. As we engage in this, as we're intentional about, hey, I want to be evangelistic to other people in this community that don't know the Lord. I want them to see that in me. That changes us. And so it's a formational practice. And then communicative act. I will make you fishers of people. That word of fish like Jesus. That people need to know God. And they know God not cognitively or intellectually only, but they need to experience God. And when we're living for Christ, when Christ is in us, they experience God through us. They experience grace through us. They experience forgiveness through us. And so that's communicative act, fish like Jesus. That's what we've covered. Why? The next line up there in the corner is the how. Like, how do we do this? What's involved in evangelism? It might be what? You want to bring that one up? Oh, okay. Well, we don't have that line, but these are the what's. So the first what is presence. And if you want to write that in that little line there, presence, and then put with that Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 15. Jesus gave this metaphor, two metaphors really, for his church that said, hey, this is what you're to look like in his Sermon on the Mount. And I'm just going to read it so I don't mess it up. But it's not going to be new news to you. Hopefully you have heard this many times before. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how could it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. So Jesus uses these two metaphors for our presence in the world, that we're to be salt of the earth and we're to be the light of the world. And you don't want to cover up that light. He gives these kind of corrections. We'll get into those at the bottom, but notice you have to be where the fish are. In Luke chapter 5, we looked at that 2 weeks ago, he said, push out into the deep, Peter. He called Peter to push out in the deep, and when he did, then he says, let down your nets, and then they had this catch, and they pulled them in. We've got to go out into the deep. We've got to be living where people are. And there's three different aspects to all of these top parts. So there's these three parts of the what, but then there's the how we do this. And so there's an individual aspect to presence. And this is really important for everybody here to grasp, that you make a difference. Like, your presence makes a difference. The witness, the effectiveness of this church, our ability to catch people for Christ, it depends on each of us being a presence. And that happens individually by being a good neighbor. You're a presence in your neighborhood, whether you're a good one or not, that's up to you. Do your neighbors know your name? Do you know their name? Do they trust you to kind of take care of this stuff? Do you guys borrow stuff back and forth? There's a lot of ways to get to know your neighbors. We should be working at that go parties is something that we were pretty intentional on. And I think that's a great way to be a presence in your neighborhood. You can help serve in the community. That's a way to be a presence. Sometimes people think, like serving on the city council or whatever, they might not connect it to church. And that's unfortunate because it's a great way to be present. These different aspects or ways that you're involved, whatever clubs that you're involved in, whatever hobbies that you have, it's a way that you can be present. But you got to be in your workplace, you're present, but do people know you're a Christian? And do they know it because you say some things that kind of make them feel bad? Or do they know it because of, you're honest and you follow through and you care about other people? That's presence as an individual. And then there's group. We got to be present as a group. And I'm going to use youth group twice in this, but I think you'll understand. So the Celebrate Recovery is CR. A Bible study, the women's Bible study is the one particular that I'm thinking of in our church. So when I was listening to this from Merv Budd and he was giving the webinar, I felt good about our church, really, I did. There's a lot of things. I think we can always do better, but I think there's some neat things happening from the people in this church and what you're doing. And our youth group is one of them. There's that group, if you're a youth and you come to that group, and it doesn't work for everybody, right? Sometimes people get the wrong vibe from the group. Sometimes somebody says the wrong thing, and that's unfortunate. But as a whole, it's attracting people. It's pulling them in, the group dynamic. Celebrate Recovery is having that same effect. This group of people that are gathering together, it just wouldn't be the same if there was one person at Celebrate Recovery, right? It wouldn't be the same if there's one person in youth group. It's like, here, I'm the youth group. Oh, okay, I was kind of expecting more. But you can get the effect with 5 or 6. People are like, oh, I want to be a part of that group. The women's Bible study is a really large group, but people all around our area, they know that this church has this women's Bible study, and women want to be a part of that Bible study and come to it. So that's some examples of a group presence in the area. And then institution is the next one. Institution presence, and I was like, ooh, institution, that's not a word that people lean into too much these days. We've become a little bit anti-institutional, I would say, in the United States, but the institution is important, and our presence as an institution, it speaks to people. So he was talking about, is your church lawn, does it look terrible in a neighborhood? Well, that communicates something. And does your church building look like nobody cares about it? That communicates something. That's an institutional presence. You can look at it at that local level. You can look at it at a larger level. There's an institution of the church worldwide. There's the institution of the church in the United States. I think of like evangelicals in the United States. That's kind of an institution. And I think we've taken some hits in the eyes of people outside the church. In some ways, I think because we've allowed ourselves to be aligned politically, in some ways too much. That's my concern. And that people are wondering, like, are they really about Jesus, or are they about, getting certain things, people elected? So those are institutional hits. When I think of our local institution of our church, I think our building is a witness that some people really notice when they come in. Sometimes people say a lot of money got spent on that building. So it's a mixed deal, but I think it is caring, like we care about what's going on. The kids ministry and the youth ministry, on Wednesday nights, this place is full of youth and kids, and that does not get lost on people that aren't a part of this church. That there are people that have been sent to this church by people that don't go to this church saying, oh, you've got kids? You should go to that church because they do stuff for kids, they do stuff for youth. And that's an institutional presence that we have. The live stream that's been developed, that's an institutional presence that people can see, okay, they care about somebody outside seeing this. It's great for shut-ins, but somebody else that might want to visit, we've had visitors, they're like, I'm starting there first, I'm going to see how weird they are And then if it's not too weird, I'll come. The staff can be a presence because they represent the institution. Like, they don't have to, but sometimes they will. So like John Day, for instance, he's going to the state training school to help with the chapel, and he helps the boys with the chapels on Monday. Like, some churches would say, don't do that. That's not what we're paying you for. So that's an institutional value that you say, yeah, or maybe now you'll say, don't do it now that you know. But no, but he goes there. And so I was there with Sarah Zomer for the Alpha studies, and the chaplains there, they all know John, and they're like, hey, we're going to have this retreat. We want John to come in and lead worship on this retreat. So these 24 kids are at retreat, and John comes in, and they're all like, Waymaker, we want Waymaker. That's what they want. And there's just a sense, and they say, the chaplain says, oh yeah, this pastor, he's the pastor at John's church. And like, immediately I've got credibility because I'm associated with John and John's church, and wherever John's church is, it must be a good church because John is awesome at leading them in worship. So that's institutional presence. And so you got to be where the fish are. And if you're not doing that, like, there's just no way to catch fish. My brother and I, when we were little in Leeds, South Dakota, my dad never fished growing up. I mean, he knows less about fishing than I do, which is pretty bad. But he bought us some Zebco reels, like the closed-in ones. They were just the starters, and he took us fishing once. We didn't really catch anything. But we got these Zebco reels, and we lived on Sunny Hill Drive, which was, Lead is like just this deep trench, and so we're up on the top on this side of the trench, and in our yard, we could cast across the road, like down the hill, across the road, down another hill, into this gravel road that went down there, who knows why, and so we would just cast like as far as we could, and we loved just casting. It's like, oh, that was great, and then sometimes you get snagged, and we try to pull it back in, but you don't catch anything, right, if your hook's not in the water. In some churches, I think that's what they're like. They're like, man, casting is amazing. Look at that cast. That's a great cast. Look at this presentation. This is incredible. It's like, yeah, get in the water. And, if you got a hook in the water, even if you're terrible at fishing, you might catch something. This time, Karis invited me out to go fishing, which, she's 18. She's going to be going off to college. Like, I better not say no. It's like, yeah, we'll go out fishing. And we went to Travis's to get some rods and reels that worked. So I got a couple of those right away. And then got them hooked up, and we went to Tower Rock in the river there, and we caught fish. Like, mine was like this. And I thought, wow, you can't catch one smaller than that, but she could. We have like a kind of a alternate kind of, and that was it. That was my fish and her fish. But don't worry, we threw them back, so they're still out there for you to catch. You got to be in the water, though, if you're going to catch fish. You're going to catch people, it's the same. You got to be in the presence of people that aren't Christians. Then you need to have something that people want, and that's deeds. They need to see something in us. Matthew 5:16, following, that you need to be salt and light. He says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So next to deeds in that column, write Matthew 5:16. People need to see you being godly. Like, not godly, but like being a real person who loves other people, who cares about people, who does things that demonstrate care, and who controls their mouth, who loves their spouse. I mean, all these kinds of things are the types of things that people need to see. And they need to see you as an individual doing these things. So, your presence in your neighborhood is good. And then, like, what kind of deeds are you doing in your neighborhood? Or, your activity in whatever community organizations they are, or at work. Like, how are you showing people the light of Jesus Christ in those ways? So some people are volunteering at the food shelf. We have a lot of people that volunteer for community service in a number of different ways. And again, sometimes they don't think that that's connected with the church, and that's unfortunate because it's a huge part of our witness. Like, how you are at work, the deeds you do at work, being a good person at work, being an honest dealer in business, like, that's huge. And being dishonest is also huge. Like, that's a great big strike against the cause of Christ. And so your individual deeds, and then group deeds. there's group service projects. Your small group can go on a service project, but maybe there's just a group of people informally that you're doing stuff, or you're praying for somebody. That you're not out there all alone doing this, that you're trying to reach people together. And so that's important. Little Rock Ministries, we have a group of people in our church that are involved in Little Rock Ministries, and they're involved with a group there. They're trying to do ministry there. That's wonderful. And we all need that. You need to be doing it as an individual, but you need a group to kind of encourage you and going. And then institutionally, there's things that we can do as an institution in this area that say, yeah, they care. And so we're trying to do that. The Go Day that we're doing in Wellsburg, that's big. We've done these Go Days now 3 times, and I remember when we did one in Steamboat and they did some work on the library, the librarian came up to me. We weren't a part of that team over there. We were working on some stuff over here, but she just came up and said, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in the community. Like that says something, that somebody's noticing, hey, we're doing this. And I think, if nobody shows up to Wellsburg, that says something. If a lot of people show up and we're working with another church and helping to reach these people, that speaks volumes. It's like Jesus said, there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Savior of us all. That the world could see like, oh, these churches aren't all against each other. Like they're working together to do what needs to be done. The missions auction tonight, I'm putting my, leaning out there, put my neck out there. It's going to be a blast. That's what I'm going to say. Because I've been involved in these things in the past. It's super fun. What Vince organized with the whodunit, the murder mystery. Somebody came to that isn't a part of this church, and they wrote feedback. They didn't say, what is a Baptist church doing a murder mystery? No, they said, that was so fun. People need to see Christians laughing and having fun together. That's an institutional deed that goes a long ways. This Go Fish event, so this Saturday, right? It's this Saturday, noon to 4. We were informed that we picked the hours that were least likely to catch fish. So it's not going to be about the fish, right? That's not what's going to make it a big deal. We're going to go fishing, but we're going to have food for 130 people. And so I just challenge you, like, if you're available, come and bring somebody. Bring somebody to come. We'd rather run out of food than have food left over. And then we're going to have the DNR park person. He's going to speak to the kids a little bit about fishing. We're going to go out and do some fishing. We'll have a boat ride for the fact that we're not going to catch any fish. We'll take it on a boat ride. And we'll have a little competition if somebody does catch some fish. Is it this big or this big? Which one you're going to win with? And so that's a way that we can be present in the community. Then, through our deeds, the last one is words. This is the one we think of first sometimes, but a lot of times evangelism training, like people train you with words. They try to give you a script, like give the script, and like maybe it's a way that you could kind of make a sale, so to speak. Like you take them through, overcome objections, and like land the deal. And so we have some scripts that we do use. These are some that I've been trained in and used, and they are effective to know the facts. Like, what do you actually want to convey to somebody, the truth about Jesus Christ? You do want to know those things, but sometimes we get hung up thinking, like, I've got to present these truths in a certain order, in a certain amount of time to get this across, and I think that's more of a hindrance than a help. When I was fishing with Aaron, he pointed out that there's drag, like a drag setting on my line. He goes, yeah, you don't want to have that too tight. Why? Because we were catching fish bigger than this. And it doesn't matter. If your fish is this big, don't worry about drag, just pull them in. But when they're bigger than your line can handle, you got to have some drag so they could take it and run a little bit. And that feels kind of good when you hear that sound, like, oh, that's a good deal. But you want to have that drag set. I think it's the same way in relationships with people. That if you think I'm just going to walk through this illustration with you and then you're going to come to the Lord, that's not the way people work most of the time. Sometimes that works. Sometimes people are ready for that. Like they're just ready to be brought into the boat and bringing in the nets, and you want to land people in the church. You do want to do that, and so there's certainly an intentionality you want, but you need to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit. Like maybe this person needs to go a little bit. Like I talked about this truth, and they're like, oh, they're feeling a little uncomfortable. Let them go. And then keep praying for them and come back in a conversation again sometime and talk a little more and just keep working to bring them in. So know these things, 4 spiritual laws. Those are helpful. The God Tools is an app you can use. It's ways to get the facts across. But Colossians 4:6 is the verse that I want you to write in by words. Colossians 4:6 says, let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you can know how to answer everyone. And I think when we think about knowing how to answer everyone, we think like stump the chump. Somebody's going to give me this question, and I'm going to know how to answer them. And you can say, well, how does having my conversation be full of grace and seasoned with salt help me to know how to answer the stump the chump question? And it doesn't help you to know how to answer the stump the chump. That's not what Paul's talking about. What Paul's talking about is that you don't want to turn on the phone voice. You're in an argument with your kids or your wife, and it's like you're talking one way, and then you get the call like, oh, hello. People actually don't even use the phone voice anymore. Like, who are you? Salesman, I thought so. They hang up. But imagine to an era when people were polite on the phone. You don't want to be that way. You don't want to be off and on. So he's saying, practice this. Have your conversation always full of grace, seasoned with salt, that there's a little bit of the things that people would know. This person believes the Lord. They're saying some of these things, but it's not overpowering. It's sprinkled in there. And it's just the way that you always talk. So when somebody asks you, you don't have to think like, oh, I gotta try to be graceful speaking and seasoned with salt. No, I don't have to try to be that way because I'm that way all the time. And that's the way I need to respond to people. Whatever you say, it's said in that way, and that's the right way to respond. You do want to have an answer for the hope that you have within you. Peter talks about that. But that assumes people are going to see this stuff in you. They're going to ask you, and then you say, what it is. And you let Jesus do the work of catching the fish, but you're being good, and you're trying to work with them to bring these people in. Group conversation. Ephesians 5:4, it says among you there shouldn't be a hint of sexual immorality, shouldn't be coarse talk, foolish joking. There's ways we should not talk as a group, in an informal group, and we need to guard against that. Another way we should not talk is we're not supposed to be complaining or argumenting all the time. When people come into a congregation or a group and they sense that kind of division and negativity, it is a turnoff. It's like, wow, I could find that anywhere. I don't need to come here to find that. But if they sense laughter and joy, sincerity, and kind of some positivity, it's like, wow, I'm hungry for that. So our group dynamics should display that in our words. And then as the institution, I think this is the smallest representation of the institution, as our congregation is gathered. It's a worldwide institution, but this is a part of it. The words we use on the platform, that makes a difference. It expresses values. It says, hey, we relate to you, or we don't want to relate to you. We're above you. We can't deal with what you deal with. And we need to be careful about those kinds of words. What we put on our website, even having a website. I was talking with Pam about churches that we could visit when we go to Mason City, and I said, I don't know if I even want to visit a church that doesn't have a website. Why? Because you got to be web savvy to be a Christian? No, but if you don't bother to put a website up, do you even care about reaching anybody outside your church in this culture? Are you just completely oblivious to the culture, or you just don't care about reaching anybody? And so those kind of things are social media. It speaks. Your social media speaks as individuals too, and you want to make sure it's saying, "Hey, I follow Christ," and you'd want to be like me. All right, that's the institutional words. So it's presence, deeds, and words, and it's individual, group, and institution, and it's all of these together. We're all working together to balance all of these out. And if we get off balance, then some weird things happen, and we don't have the effect that we want to have. And so he listed some of those on this outside lip. These are the distortions. So if you're just all talk, if you're all words, on the bottom there, philosophism, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. That's Dr. Bud's words there. But the meaning of it is somebody that's kind of being deceptive. Like they're acting like they know these truths, but they don't really know them. And we can talk a good talk sometimes, like take somebody through these things, but like, does our life match up? If it doesn't match up, there's going to be a hollowness to it. Have people been caught that way? They have. Like, by the grace of God, he's used some real hucksters to bring people into the kingdom, but it's certainly not the way we want to be. Narcissistic altruism. If you focus on deeds, there's a danger of kind of thinking like, wow, look at my deeds. Aren't I amazing? And, the whole group can say, aren't we amazing? Look at us and pat ourselves on the back. And Jesus spoke against this strongly. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, he says, do not do your works of righteousness. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And it's interesting because in 5:16 he says, be sure to let your light shine, let people see your deeds so they can glorify your Father in heaven. Some people take this secrecy and they make it into the exact thing that Jesus was not wanting them to do. They're like, yeah, I never let anybody see what I give. It's like, oh, good for you. No, it's not about that. It's about, are you doing this to be good for others, or are you doing this to look good in front of others? And if you're doing stuff to look good in front of others, then that's not very attractive. That doesn't bring people in. Presence, the presence dichotomy is caught in Jesus' metaphor. So he highlights one problem, isolationism. If you're thinking about keeping the salt pure, like you don't want the salt to lose its saltiness, and some congregations and some denominations are very worried about this, which good reason, because it's easy to lose your saltiness. And so they're like, we're going to keep our saltiness. We're not even going to get around people that could bleed off our saltiness. And so, we're going to isolate ourselves from everybody that seems non-Christian to us or not Christian enough to us. And so they just separate. We're going to separate from the people that don't separate. There's secondary separation. There's tertiary separation. It's ridiculous. Like, where does it end? And they have no impact on the world because they have no connection with people in the world in a way that they could see. They're so unlike Christ, who was accused of hanging out with sinners. So that's one danger. The other danger is the people that's the, hide your light under a bushel. The other people, they don't hide their light under a bushel basket, but they just lose their saltiness. They're dissolution almost because there's no distinction. You don't know that they're Christian at all. They're so afraid to offend that they don't put a cross on the building. They don't talk about Jesus to anybody. And it's like, there's no impact there. So presence has to have that balance with words and deeds, the love. You don't want to just be operating on your own like a Rambo evangelist. You need a group to bring people into. You don't want to just be operating as a group like nobody else matters because it's a part of this whole institution that Jesus established. And you don't want to be thinking just about the institution because this institution needs to form groups that care about individuals. So it's got to be balanced.